The space station was alive with noise and movement. Alien voices overlapped in the air like tangled threads. Cargo crates floated on anti-grav sleds. Merchants shouted prices in languages full of clicks and hisses. Security drones buzzed past. Scanning every face for trouble, the air smelled of oil, metal, and the faint bitterness of recycled oxygen. In the middle of all that chaos, in the far corner of the cargo bay, sat a human. His chair was old and dented, pulled up against the wall, near a stack of forgotten supply boxes. He didn't move much. His elbows rested on his knees and his head tilted slightly forward. His clothes were plain dark trousers, a faded jacket with one torn sleeve. To anyone passing by, he looked like nothing worth noticing. The crew of the Vectrodon barely spared him a glance. They were busy unloading cargo-long steel containers marked with the crest of the Vectra Trade Alliance. The captain, a tall insectoid being with sharp mandibles, gave orders in a crisp, clicking tone. The young ensign, small and slender with pale blue skin, ran to and from the ship, helping wherever she could. No one spoke to the human. No one asked why he was there. Most assumed he was just some low-grade passenger the captain had picked up for a few credits. Maybe a drifter or runaway worker. He didn't complain, didn't ask for food, didn't join conversations. He simply sat. And yet there was something the ensign noticed at first. Whenever someone walked too close to him, there was a strange feeling, as if the air grew heavy. For half a second, not enough to stop you breathing, but enough to make you pause. Most brushed it off as tiredness or station fatigue. But the ensign found herself slowing down every time she passed his corner. Once, while carrying a container of spare parts, she glanced over her shoulder. The human was looking at her. Eyes were dark, too dark, like the black between stars. She blinked, and for just a moment she thought they glowed faintly, not with light, but with depth, as if something was moving far behind them. She shook her head and looked away. When she checked again, his gaze was down, and he seemed like any other quiet passenger. The captain didn't like humans much. They were rare in this part of space, and those who did show up were often desperate or strange, primitive creatures. He once muttered to his first officer, "They act like they know things they shouldn't." But the human in the corner never acted at all, which suited the captain fine. The cargo bay doors opened again, letting in a rush of cold station air. Dock workers came and went. The human stayed still, like a shadow pretending to be a man. Then, the hum of the station changed. It was subtle at first, a deeper vibration beneath the usual mechanical thrum. The ensign's skin prickled, while she stopped stacking crates and looked around. Several dock workers frowned, their antennae twitching. Somewhere far above, a muffled metallic crash echoed through the structure. A voice burst over the station comms. Speaking in the trade language, all personnel, attention. Level 6 breach detected. All sectors secure lockdown procedures immediately. The crew froze. A breach? That meant someone had forced their way into the station? The captain barked. Orders clicking rapidly in his native tongue. The crew moved fast, sealing the cargo doors, locking down compartments. The hum grew louder. Then the alarm started, a deep repeating wail that rattled the air. Red lights strobed across the cargo bay, throwing everything into flashes of crimson and shadow. The ensign's stomach tightened. She had heard that alarm before during pirate raids. Through the open hangar doors, distant shapes moved in the corridor's armored figures. Weapons raised, firing into crowds. Screams carried through the metal halls. Security drones zipped past, firing energy bolts, but many were shot down before they could even aim. The captain swore and signaled the crew to grab weapons. The ensign reached for her sidearm, hands shaking. The attackers were coming closer, and then, for the first time since she had boarded the Vectra Dawn, the human moved. He stood slowly, like someone waking from a long sleep. His joints didn't. Papa's muscles didn't stretch, he simply rose, smooth and silent. His head lifted, and the ensign saw his face clearly for the first time. It was pale, the skin marked with faint lines, not of age, but of long fatigue. His eyes met hers, and she felt that same pressure again, stronger this time. pushing against her chest. The captain didn't notice. He was too busy shouting at the crew. The human stepped forward. The dock lights flickered briefly as he passed. Under them, no one blocked his way. No one even seemed to think to stop him. He walked past the Vectrodon crew and toward the chaos in the corridor beyond. One of the armored raiders rounded the corner, charging forward, weapon raised. The ensign saw the human glance at him. Just a glance, and then something happened. The raider froze mid-step. His weapon slipped from his claws. His breathing became rapid, panicked. Then he screamed, not a battle cry, but the raw scream of someone seeing something they could not bear. His voice broke into a choking gasp, and he collapsed, body limp. His helmet clattered on the metal floor, rolling until it hit the wall. No one else seemed to see it. The captain, firing down the hall, didn't even notice the fallen enemy. But the ensign had seen everything. And she had seen something else behind the human, in the flickering red light. His shadow was not following his body. It moved a heartbeat. Too late, twisting like it had its own mind, the human stepped over the dead raider and continued walking forward. Unhurried, the alarms wailed on. More raiders appeared in the distance. The crew opened fire, energy bolts lighting the corridor. But the human didn't draw a weapon. He didn't run. He just kept walking, toward them, calm as a drifting cloud. The ensign couldn't stop staring. Somewhere deep in her mind, an old story surfaced, something she'd heard as a child. A warning, maybe. She couldn't remember the words, only the feeling. Fear of the dark. And fear of the humans who lived there once. The human reached the bend in the corridor and disappeared from sight. A second later, there was silence. Not the silence of safety, this was different. Heavy. Waiting. Then the lights flickered again, and the screaming started. The screams echoed through the corridor like sharp cracks in the air. They didn't sound like normal combat there were. No shouts of commands, no sound of blaster fire after the first few seconds. It was just screaming, sudden and raw. Like fear had swallowed every other thought. The Vectrodon crew froze where they stood, weapons raised but not firing. Even the captain's voice caught in his throat. The alarms still pulsed, painting the corridor in flashes of red and shadow, but the noise from the attackers had changed. No more charging footsteps, no more weapons clanging. Only the sound of boots scraping against metal as someone tried to run. Failed. The young ensign gripped her blaster tighter. She took one step forward before the captain's clawed hand shot out, stopping her. "Stay here," he hissed. She shook her head. "Someone has to see." The captain's antennae twitched nervously. "It's not our fight, not yet, but it was their fight. Everyone could feel it. The raiders had come here for a reason. And whether the crew liked it or not, that human was now in the middle of it." A shape appeared at the far end of the hall. At first, the ensign thought it was the human coming back. But no, this figure moved too fast, stumbling, crashing into the walls. It was one of the raiders. His armor was torn open in long, jagged lines, as though something had clawed at it from the inside. His helmet was gone, and his alien face was twisted in a mask of terror. His eyes darted around wildly, as if he could still see something chasing him in the shadows. He never made it to the cargo bay. Something jerked him backward into the darkness so quickly that the ensign almost missed it. He didn't even scream this time. The crew stood frozen. No one spoke. Then the human walked into view. He came slowly, his boots making no sound on the metal floor. There was no blood on him, no weapon in his hands. But the air around him felt heavier now, as if the very atmosphere had grown thicker. Pressing down on everyone's shoulders, the captain stepped forward, mandibles clicking sharply. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "You want to get us all killed?" The human stopped a few steps away, his face calm. "They won't be." "Back," he said simply. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the noise of the alarms, cutting through like a blade. The captain bristled. "Won't be back? Do you know how many?" A low, metallic groan cut him off. The station shuddered. Somewhere above, explosions thudded through the structure. The voice over the comms returned, this time urgent and strained. "All personnel sector locked down. Failed enemy forces in multiple sectors. Evacuate immediately. The crew exchanged glances. Out. This was bad. Raiders in more than one sector meant they weren't just here for random loot. They were targeting something or someone. The ensign's eyes went to the human. He was watching the flashing red light above the cargo doors, as if measuring something in his mind. She swallowed. They're after you, aren't they? He looked at her then, and she felt her chest tighten. Yes, he said. No one else seemed to notice the way his shadow twitched on the floor, curling slightly toward her like it was listening. The captain's antennae went rigid. Why? He demanded. The human didn't answer. Instead, he turned toward the Vectrodon and began walking. We should leave, he said over his shoulder. Now. The captain hesitated, torn between pride and survival. Another explosion rocked the station, and the decision was made for him. Everyone aboard. He snapped. The crew moved fast, sprinting up the ramp and into the ship. The ensign glanced back one last time before stepping inside. The human was still outside, scanning the corridor as if making sure nothing followed them. Then he stepped aboard, and the cargo ramp sealed shut behind him. Inside, the Vectrodon shook as the engines roared to life. The captain's voice barked through the comms. Full burn, get us clear of the station before their ships lock on. Through the viewports, the station spun away, its silver rings scarred with fire and smoke. Several small ship's pirate vessels darted around it like insects, some firing at fleeing transports, others chasing the larger freighters. The Vectrodon threaded between them, taking a few glancing hits, but keeping speed. The ensign strapped herself in at the crew bench, eyes darting to the far corner of the cabin. The human had taken a seat there, leaning back with his arms crossed. He looked completely at ease, like they weren't being hunted through space. The captain stalked into the cabin, fury in his voice. He jabbed a claw toward the human. Whatever you are, you've brought danger onto my ship. His gaze was fixed out the viewport, watching the pirate ships fall behind. I should throw you out the airlock, the captain growled. Finally, the human spoke. If I hadn't acted back there, you wouldn't be here to say that. The captain's mandibles clicked in frustration. Acted? All I saw was you walking into the fight without a weapon, and somehow they died. How? The human looked at him, and for a heartbeat the cabin seemed darker. You don't want to know, the captain scoffed, but there was a faint tremor in his voice now. He turned away, muttering curses under his breath. The ensign kept her eyes on the human, studying him. There was something in the way he sat, too. Still, too controlled. Like someone waiting for a storm to pass, but also ready to become the storm, if it did. Outside, the stars blurred as the ship jumped too faster than light travel. The tension in the cabin eased slightly, though no one truly relaxed. The human closed his eyes. They'll come again, he said quietly. No one asked how he knew. The hum of the Vectrodon's engines was steady now, but the crew didn't. Relax. They sat in silence. Some strapped into their seats, others pacing the narrow aisles. Up. The stars outside stretched into long streaks from the faster-than-light jump. But even that sight did nothing to calm their nerves. The captain stood near the cockpit door, claws clicking against the wall. His antennae twitched restlessly. Every few seconds, his eyes darted toward the far corner of the cabin toward the human. The man sat alone, head tilted slightly down, hands resting loosely on his knees. He looked almost asleep, but there was no mistaking the way his eyes would flick open whenever someone shifted too close. The young ensign kept glancing at him from her seat. She was still thinking about what she had seen on the station, the way that Raider had frozen. The way the human shadow had moved just a little too slowly. No one else seemed to notice details like that, or maybe they simply didn't want. Finally, the captain spoke. We need to talk, he said, voice sharp. He took a step toward the human. The man didn't move. About what? About why those raiders were there, the captain said. Why they followed us. Why they ignored every other ship until they found this one. You know the answer. Don't deny it. The human's eyes opened fully now. They were dark not just in color, but in a way that seemed to swallow the light around them. If I told you, he said slowly. It wouldn't change anything. The captain's mandibles clacked together. It would change whether or not you stay on my ship. The man gave the faintest smile, though there was no humor in it. If I leave, you die sooner. If I stay, you might live a little longer. The cabin went quiet. The crew members exchanged uneasy glances. One of the engineers, a broad reptilian with burn scars across his jaw, slammed a clawed fist onto the table. I say we throw him out. I don't care what he did on the station. I don't want him bringing death to our door. The ensign leaned forward. He saved us, she said quickly. You didn't see, no, the engineer snapped. Didn't see, and I don't want to. The captain raised a hand for silence. Enough. We'll decide later. For now, keep him in sight. The human closed his eyes again, as if the conversation no longer interested him. Hours passed in uneasy quiet. The crew busied themselves with repairs, patching hull burns, checking weapon systems, recalibrating the nav computer. The damage from the station escape had been worse than they first thought. The Vectrodon could keep running for now, but she wouldn't survive another major fight without real maintenance. That night, if it could be called night in the endless dark, the ensign found herself walking the dim corridors of the ship. She told herself she was checking for leaks and loose panels, but the truth was she couldn't sleep. The image of that raider being pulled into the dark replayed in her mind again and again. She reached the crew lounge and stopped. The human was there, sitting at one of the small tables. He was drinking from a plain metal cup, though she couldn't smell anything in it. Can't sleep? He asked without looking at her. She hesitated before stepping inside. No, he nodded as if that was the only answer he'd expected. You saw? He said after a moment. She frowned. Saw what? What I did? He said. His voice was flat, but there was something under it, a weight, maybe regret, maybe warning. She didn't answer right away. Then, you killed them. Without touching them? His gaze shifted to her. And that scares you, she swallowed. Should it? For a moment, he didn't reply. Then he leaned back in his chair. Fear's just recognition. You know, somewhere deep, that I'm not like the others you've met. Not like the humans you've met either. She stared at him. What are you? He didn't smile this time. One who should have died a long time ago. The silence between them was thick. Somewhere far in the ship, metal groaned with the shift of FTL drift. Before she could ask more, the captain's voice came over the comm. Bridge 2 all crew drop, from FTL in 5 minutes. Prepare for short repair stop. The human rose from the table, setting the cup down. Repairs, he said softly. That means slowing down. She frowned. So, at her, he walked past her toward the door. They'll find us faster. 5 minutes later, the stars outside shrank back into points of light as the ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel. They were in a dead patch of space, floating among the remains of an asteroid field. The plan was to hide inside the shadow of a large rock while the engineers fixed the worst of the damage. The crew went to work. The captain stayed on the bridge, watching scanners. The human stood near the airlock, staring into the black between the drifting stones. The ensign joined him. Do you think they're out there right now? She asked. He didn't answer immediately. His eyes tracked the shadows moving across the asteroid's surface as the ship slowly rotated. They never stop, he said finally. You might think, you've escaped, but they're always close, always listening. Her skin prickled. Listening for what? For me? He said, and then somewhere in the darkness, an answering signal blinked on the radar. The radar ping was faint. It was enough. The captain's voice snapped over the comm. All crew and known contact detected. Brace for possible engagement. In the asteroid field's half-light, the Vectrodon was a shadow among shadows. The massive rocks drifted slowly, colliding now and then with a distant metallic thud. But in that black stillness, the faint blip on the scanner was like a heartbeat in the dark. The ensign leaned over the sensor display. It's moving slow, but it's closing on our position. The captain's antennae twitched sharply. They found us. The human didn't react. He stood near the airlock, watching the darkness beyond the viewport, as if he'd been expecting this. "How many?" he asked quietly. The ensign checked again. "Just one ship." The human's gaze stayed fixed outside. "That's the scout. The others are already here." Before anyone could respond, the sensor alarm began to wail. Multiple contacts appeared. 6, then 8, then 12. The blips moved in formation, circling the asteroid like predators around wounded prey. The crew scrambled. Engineers abandoned their external repairs, pulling the airlock shut. Weapons powered up with a rising hum. Captain barked orders in short, sharp bursts, shields too full. Armed dorsal cannons. Lock targeting on nearest hostiles. The ensign gripped her seat in the weapons pit, eyes darting between the scanner and the viewport. She could see flashes of movement, now dark shapes sliding between the asteroids. Their hull lights dimmed to near invisibility. The first shot came without warning. A beam of green light lanced through the void, grazing the Vectrodon's shields and sending a shiver through the deck plates. "Return fire," the captain roared. The crew obeyed, and the asteroid field came alive with light and thunder. Cannons roared. Energy bolts streaked between drifting rocks. Explosions lit the darkness for brief moments before vanishing into black again. But for every pirate ship they hit, 2 more slipped in closer. The captain's voice grew more frantic. "They're hurting us. They want us boxed in." The human turned toward him. "They don't want the ship," he said. "They want me." The captain spun toward him, mandibles flaring. "Then go. Take the escape pod and get out." "They'd follow," the human said simply. "And they'd kill you first, to make me come back." Another impact shook the ship. The shields flickered. Warning lights glowed red along the weapons pit. "They'll board any second." The ensign shouted over the noise. The human stepped away from the viewport and toward the captain. "Seal your crew in the engine room now." The captain hesitated. "What?" "Do it," the human said, his voice low but sharp as a blade. "Or you'll all be dead in 2 minutes." Something in his tone made the captain pause. Then, with a curse, he hit the ship-wide come. "All crew fall back to the engine room. Lock all hatches behind you." And the corridors filled with pounding footsteps as the crew obeyed. The ensign stayed where she was, watching the human. "You're staying out here?" she said. He looked at her, and for a moment she thought she saw something not in his eyes, but behind them, shadow moving. "Yes," he said. The captain grabbed her arm. "Move, ensign. That's an order." She wanted to argue, but the next blast shook the deck so hard she nearly fell. She let the captain drag her toward the engine room. But at the last moment, she glanced back. The human stood in the middle of the cargo deck. Alone, the hatch sealed shut behind them. Inside the engine room, the crew huddled together. The only sound was the hum of the engines and the faint, distant echo of metal tearing. Then came the unmistakable thud of boarding clamps attaching to the hull. "They're here," the engineer whispered. The next sound was the hiss of cutting torches. Sparks fell like rain from the edges of the hatch outside. Metal groaned. Then silence. The crew waited. Seconds stretched into minutes. From somewhere deep in the ship came a scream knot, the voice of anyone they knew. Then another and another, until it was a chorus of panic. Something thudded against the walls, heavy enough to rattle the tools on the shelves. The ensign's pulse pounded in her ears. She imagined the pirates storming through the corridors, only 2. Vanish. Then the lights flickered. A shadow passed across the narrow porthole of the engine room door. It wasn't shaped like any person she'd ever seen. When the noise finally stopped, the silence was heavier than before. The captain keyed the come. "Status report," he demanded, though his voice shook. No reply came. After what felt like hours, the engine room hatch opened. The human stood there. He was breathing normally, though his jacket was torn in several places. There was no blood on him. "They won't be coming back," he said. The captain stared at him. "What did you do?" The human's gaze slid past him toward the ensign. "Kept my promise." He turned and walked away, his shadow stretching unnaturally. Long across the floor before vanishing around the corner, the Vectrodon drifted in the quiet after the battle. its hull scarred and shields running low. The asteroid field was still around them, but the pirates were gonna every ship either destroyed or silent. The crew moved cautiously through the corridors, weapons still in hand, as if expecting something to jump from the shadows. The young ensign walked slowly, eyes scanning the walls. She half expected to see scorch marks from blasters or blood smeared across the floor, but the hallways were clean, almost untouched. Only here and there were small dents in the metal, as if something heavy had slammed against it. The captain's voice echoed from the bridge. "Engineering, report status." "Engines are stable," came the reply, though the engineer's voice was unsteady. "We can move, but not fast." The ensign found herself drifting toward the cargo deck. She didn't mean to her feet, just carried her there. She needed to see the place where the fight had happened. When the door slid open, she froze. The human was there, sitting on a crate with his elbows on his knees. His jacket hung open, revealing a dark shirt torn at the shoulder. His skin was unmarked, but there was a strange, faint shimmer in the air around him, like heat rising from metal. She stepped inside slowly. "It's clean." He didn't look up. "They don't leave a mess when they're afraid." She frowned. Who doesn't? He finally raised his head, and she saw the depth in his eyes again, like staring into a place too deep to measure. The kind of people who know they've already lost. Her pulse quickened. "You mean the pirates? Or not pirates?" He said flatly. "Not really. Just scavengers working for something bigger, something older." She hesitated. "Older than what?" He didn't answer. Before she could press him, the captain's heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. The insectoid entered, antennae stiff. "We need answers," he said, without preamble. "You're going to give them." Human regarded him calmly. "You wouldn't believe me." The captain's mandibles snapped shut. "Try me." The man was silent for a long time. The only sound was the faint hum of the engines. Then slowly he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small, flat piece of metal. It was a badge, tarnished, scratched, but still bearing a crest, a dark star surrounded by 12 narrow lines. The captain stared at it, his antennae curling back in shock. "That's yes," the human said. The ensign looked between them. "What is it?" The captain's voice was lower now, almost a whisper. "Night Guard. The human special forces from the Galactic War. The ones that shouldn't exist anymore." "I thought they were just stories," the ensign said. "They were never stories," the human said quietly. "We were different. We were made to fight in places others couldn't, in ways others couldn't." The ensign swallowed, and the war ended. Wrote over 100 years ago. The human put the badge back in his jacket. "Yes." The captain stepped closer. "Then how are you still alive?" There was no change in the man's face. "Because I haven't finished the job." Silence settled over the cargo deck like a weight. The captain's eyes narrowed. "Your job is?" The human looked past him, toward the dark emptiness outside the viewport. "Hunting them. Every last one." The ensign followed his gaze. "The ones who attacked the station? They were scouts," he said, "testing your defenses. When they fail, they send the hunters." The captain's claws flexed. "And how far behind are these hunters?" The human stood, moving to the viewport, close enough that I can hear them. The ensign felt her skin prickle. "Hear them? You mean on the coms?" "No," he said almost to himself. "Hear them in the dark." The captain exhaled sharply. "We should turn you over. If they want you, we let them have you and keep our ship." The man's voice was still calm, but there was something cold in it now. "If you do that, they'll kill you anyway. Not because you helped me, because you saw me." The ensign's breath caught. "Saw you do what?" The human turned back toward them, and for just an instant the light in the room seemed to dim. His shadow stretched unnaturally long across the floor, touching both their feet. "What I was made to do," he said, and then the proximity alarm began to scream. The alarm's wail filled the ship, a deep, steady pulse that set every nerve on edge. Red lights swept across the corridors, flashing over the crew as they ran to their stations. The captain's voice cut through the noise. Contacts on approach. For vessels fast and heavy? The ensign rushed to the bridge, nearly colliding with the engineer in the narrow hallway. She slipped into her seat at the weapons console, eyes snapping to the scanner. The shapes were already close to close. They moved with frightening speed, weaving between asteroids like predators that knew exactly where their prey would run. "They're not even slowing," she said. The captain's antennae twitched sharply. "Hunters," he muttered. The humans stepped onto the bridge, calm as if the alarm were background noise. "You can't outrun them," he said, "and you can't outgun them." The captain shot him a glare. "Then what do you suggest?" The human's eyes went to the asteroid cluster ahead. "Hide." "We're in the middle of a rock field," the captain snapped. "Scan every knot in the rocks," the man said. "In the dark between them." The ensign frowned. "What's the difference?" The human looked at her. "They can see the rocks. They can't see me." Another alarm bleared, this one sharper, faster. The hunters had fired. A bolt of violet energy streaked past the viewport, close enough to light the bridge in its glow. The captain cursed and turned to the helm officer. "Do it. Drop us in behind cover. Now." The Vectrodon banked hard, slipping between two massive asteroids. The crew strapped in as loose tools clattered across the floor. Outside, the black walls of rock filled the viewport, blocking sight of the hunters for a moment, but it wouldn't last. The human stepped away from the bridge controls. "Lock the ship down. Seal the crew in the aft section." The captain's mandibles clicked in frustration. "I'm not letting you if you don't," the human said. "They'll cut through this bridge in under 2 minutes. Captain hesitated, then barked into the cum. "All crew fall back to Section C now." The ensign stood, heart pounding. "I'm staying." The human didn't look at her. "No, you'll be in my way." "I won't." He turned then, and the look in his eyes froze her in place. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even threat. It was emptiness. Like looking into the open door of space itself, she swallowed hard and backed toward the hatch. When the bridge was empty, except for him, the human reached into his jacket and pulled something from a hidden pocket. It looked like a thin strip of black metal, no bigger than his hand, etched with strange patterns. He pressed it to the side of his neck. For a moment, nothing happened. Then his shadow began to move. It stretched, not with the motion of the ships, light, but as if it were pulling itself free from the floor. It grew taller, darker, the edges breaking into faint tendrils that writhed and curled. The first hunter ship appeared around the edge of the asteroid, sleek, armored, bristling with weapon ports. It fired instantly, but instead of striking the hull, the bolt seemed to vanish, swallowed by the darkness pooling around the ship. The human stepped to the viewport. His lips moved, but no sound reached the air. The tendrils of shadow slid along the glass like oil in water, in the black between the asteroids. Something answered. The ensign, sealed in Section C with the rest of the crew, felt the temperature drop. The lights flickered once, twice, then, held steady. No one spoke. They all heard it, a low, distant sound, like the hum of a great machine, but layered with something else. Something almost alive. Then came the screams, not human screams, not even alien in the usual sense. These were sharp, ragged bursts, cut off as quickly as they began. The deck trembled, not from weapons fire, but from impacts, something moving across the hull, fast and heavy. The captain tried to call the bridge. No response. Outside, the hunters tried to break formation, but their engines flared erratically, their weapons firing into empty space. One of the ships spun out of control and slammed into an asteroid, vanishing in a burst of light. Another simply went dark, and through it all, the human stood motionless on the bridge, his shadow now towering over him like a living thing. The tendrils lashed outward, fading into the black between the rocks, pulling shapes out of the void shapes the scanners couldn't register, shapes that didn't reflect light, but seemed to drink it in. Minutes passed. Then it was over. The shadows shrank back, slipping toward the floor until they were only his again. The human removed the black strip from his neck and slid it back into his jacket. When the captain and the ensign finally reached the bridge, hunters were gone. Only drifting debris remained. The human didn't look at them. His gaze was fixed on the stars ahead. "They'll send more," he said quietly. The captain's voice was rough. "What are you?" The man turned his head slightly, the faintest smile on his lips. "The last thing they fear." The Vectra dawn drifted in uneasy silence. No alarms, no weapons fire. Just the quiet hum of the ship's systems and the faint, metallic groans of stressed hull plating. The crew kept their voices low, as if afraid the darkness outside might hear them. On the bridge, the captain leaned over the navigation table. "We can't stay here. If what you say is true, the next wave will be bigger. We'll be caught before we can make a jump." The human stood near the viewport, his hands behind his back, eyes fixed on the stars. "It's not about speed anymore. It's about being ready." The ensign glanced between them. "Ready for what?" He didn't answer. The captain's antennae twitched sharply. "I've seen enough. You've saved us from the hunters. But I will not have my ship turned into bait for whatever is chasing you." The warning chime cut him off. The scanner display lit up in red. Dozens of new contacts. The ensign's eyes widened. "They're here." The captain moved to the helm station, mandibles tight. "How many?" Her voice faltered. 20. "No, 30 ships, all heading straight for us." Human didn't turn from the viewport. Not ships. Extermination line. The crew stared at him. "They'll sweep through everything," he said, voice flat. "Not just this ship. It's any station, any vessel in range. They burn the path clean so nothing survives to warn the others." The captain's claws flexed. "Then we run." The human finally looked at him. "Can't outrun the dark." The ensign felt the words sink into her chest like a weight. The captain's voice was sharp. "Then what? You want us to sit here and wait to die?" The human stepped away from the viewport. "No. I want you to get your crew into the aft section and lock it down. Whatever happens, you don't come out until it's over." The captain bristled. "I don't take orders on my own ship." The man's eyes met his. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Then, without raising his voice, the human said, "You will if you want to live." The captain hesitated. Then slowly, he gave the order. The ensign stayed behind as the others left. Her hands clenched at her sides. "I'm not hiding again." He didn't argue this time. He just looked at her for a long moment, as if measuring something. Then he said, "Stay out of the cargo bay until I call you. If you go in before, you won't come back out." She swallowed hard and nodded. When she finally left the bridge, the human moved toward the lower decks. The corridors were dim, shadows, pooling in the corners as if the lights couldn't quite reach them. He entered the cargo bay and sealed the hatch. For a moment, he stood in the center of the empty space, listening. Then he reached into his jacket and removed the black strip of metal again. He pressed it to his neck. The air changed. The temperature dropped sharply. Frost began to form on the edges of the bulkheads. Overhead lights flickered and then dimmed, leaving only a faint glow from the emergency strips along the floor. The human shadow spread out across the deck, stretching into shapes that didn't match his body. The tendrils of darkness rose, curling like smoke, each one tipped with something sharp and glistening outside, and the fleet closed in. The first volley struck the Vectrodon's shields, lighting the ship in bursts of blue and white. The hull groaned. Under the force, another hit followed, then another. Inside the cargo bay, the human whispered something words too old for translation. Sounds that seemed to sink into the metal itself, and the shadows answered. The ensign in the aft section, with the others, felt it again, that low, alien hum vibrating through the deck. The air tasted metallic. Her hands trembled against the bulkhead, and she didn't know if it was fear or something else. Then the screaming began. Not from inside the ship. From outside. Through the narrow viewport in the aft section. She saw shapes moving between the enemy vessels, too fast to track, too dark to see clearly. Enemy weapons fired wildly, striking their own ships. Tearing through their own formation, one hunter vessel split in two, not from weapons fire, but as if something had sliced it cleanly in the dark. Another ship simply vanished, its lights winking out, its hull folding in on itself before disappearing entirely, and in the cargo bay. The human moved like a conductor before an orchestra, his hands guiding the writhing shadows. His voice never rose, but the darkness obeyed. The enemy fleet broke formation, ships trying to flee in every direction. But the shadows didn't just follow, they were already there, waiting. The ensign pressed her hand against the viewport. "What is he doing?" she whispered. The captain's voice was low. "Finishing the job." Minutes passed like hours. Then, suddenly, the scanner readings dropped to 0. No enemy ships, no escape beacons. Just drifting fragments and silence. The ensign ran to the cargo bay as the lockdown lifted. The hatch slid open and she froze. The frost on the walls was already melting. The shadows were gone. The human stood alone, breathing slowly as if nothing had happened. She stepped inside. "They're all gone." He nodded once. For now she hesitated. What happens when more come? Like he looked at her, and there was no hint of triumph in his face, only weariness. "Then I do it again." The wreckage drifted in silence. No engines, distress calls. Only the slow tumble of broken metal and the faint glow of dying embers. The Vectrodon floated at the edge of the destruction. Inside, the crew moved carefully, as if afraid to disturb the quiet. The captain stood on the bridge, staring at the debris on the scanner. 30 ships, he said. Gone. The ensign glanced at him. "They were going to kill us." "They still did," the captain replied softly. "Just not in the way they planned." The hatch opened, and the human stepped onto the bridge. His jacket was zipped, his expression unreadable, his movements calm to calm for someone who had just wiped out a fleet. The captain turned to him. "You could have told us. From the beginning." The man's gaze slid to the stars. "You wouldn't have believed me." The ensign stepped forward. "I believe you now. But I still don't know what you are." For a moment he didn't answer. Then, slowly, he said, "Once there were wars that burned whole systems. Things were unleashed. Things not born in any world. Call them shadows. They don't build. They don't reason. They only consume." The captain frowned. "You saying they're still out there?" "They never left," the man replied. "Your maps just got smaller." The ensign's voice was quiet. "And you?" "I was part of the last line between them and everyone else. We were called the Night Guard. We went where the shadows gathered. We stopped them before they could spread. Sometimes that meant destroying whole fleets. Sometimes whole planets." The bridge was silent. The captain's antennae shifted uneasily. "And the others like you?" The man's eyes darkened. "Gone. I am the last." The ensign studied him. "If you're the last, who guards you?" He almost smiled at that. "Almost I don't need guarding." The scanners beeped. One single contact, far away, moving toward them, yet fast but steady. The human's expression changed. Not fear, not surprise, just recognition. "They found me sooner than I thought." Captain gripped the helm. "We can run." He shook his head. "No, if I run, they'll follow, and they'll find somewhere else to feed." The ensign took a step toward him. "And let us fight with you." He looked at her for a long moment, then at the captain. "No, you've seen what follows me. It's better if you leave now and never speak of this." Captain hesitated. "And you?" "I finished what I started," turned and walked toward the lift. The bridge stayed silent, the only sound the hum of the engines. The ensign's voice finally broke the stillness. "If you survive, where will you go?" He stopped in the doorway, looking out at the stars. "Where the dark is deepest." The door slid shut. Outside, the lone contact kept coming. And somewhere beyond the sensor's reach, the shadows stirred again. The end.